Headshot.
Alright, what's going on YouTube? Today we're going to do a little video on wrist wraps, why we use them, different kinds of wrist wraps, and how to put them on. So, to start off, basically why we use wrist wraps. We use wrist wraps because when we're doing bench press, overhead pressing, curls, whatever, if you have weak wrists or if you're doing a lot of volume or anything like that, the wrist wraps can help. So keep them in line, stuff like that. Especially during bench press, when you're doing a heavy bench press, wrist wraps are vital. You have a lot of little small bones inside your wrist. You really don't have as much strength there. Wrist wraps can really actually make a dramatic improvement in your bench press and how well you press. And it also is a little bit of a added confidence and security. So, let's go over some different types of wrist wraps. First one I got here is basically your average, everyday, hardbanger wrist wrap. It's 18 inches long. These things cost like $10 for a set, but they're really thin. They're real super stretchy, but they don't offer a ton of support. You could crank them down and really wrap them up tight, and they would help, but for like big bench press and stuff like that, these really aren't the key. For squats, curls, or just whatever, maybe just minor wrist pain for like rehab and stuff, these are actually pretty good. Other than that, I really don't recommend them. I only have them for rehab use and stuff like that, but I figured I'd show them off as an example. Moving on, we got a better set of wrist wraps. These are my Rogue Fitness. These are 18 inches, and they're a lot thicker, a lot heavier. They're a little worn out, so they stretch a little more than they should, but either way, they're also like a year and a half old. These will actually get you something. These will do a lot of good for bench press and overhead press and everything. These offer a good deal of support, especially when you crank them down really good and get a nice wrap on them. They're not as supportive as, say, some of your heavier wraps or anything like that, but $20, probably the best bang for buck wrist wrap you're ever going to find. And all in all, I would say if you're going to buy something and you don't want to spend a lot of money, this would be where I would go with it. Alright, so now we're going to move into some upper end wraps. These are Titan support wraps. These are the titaniums. These are 24 inches long. These are probably, if you're going to start benching pretty heavy, the minimum I would recommend. These are super thick, very, very, very tight. When you crank these things down, they'll almost get a cast-like feel. And again, big bench press, anything where you're really going to be putting a lot of stress on your wrist or anything like that, excellent wrap. I actually use these for when I do squats and stuff because I like a lot of support into my wrist. But right here is probably the bare minimum I would ever use if I was going for anything, say competition style bench press or anything like that. Now, moving on. These are my competition wraps. These are 36 inches long. These are Titan Support Systems THPs. These are the best wraps that they offer, period. Hands down, these things are the toughest wraps I've ever had. You wrap these at full length around your wrist, you will have a cast around your wrist, period. Hands down, the best. The reason for 36 inches is because that is the maximum length for competition, and obviously the longer the wrap, the more you're going to have to wrap with, so the tighter you can get it, the more support you're going to have, the better it's going to be. Now, you don't need 36-inch wraps if you're not competing. You don't technically need 36-inch wraps, period. I did them because it's the maximum length you're allowed. You might as well go with the maximum. It's just easier that way. So, that being said, I'm going to give a little example of how to use these things. And first, you have your thumb loop here. Some of them have thumb loops on one side and in the other. These don't. These are on both sides. You'll have to kind of play with that a little bit, but I'll show you how to wrap them here. So what I usually do is I just take them around my wrist first, like so, I don't actually make anything tight or anything like that. And you'll have basically a big old ball on your wrist. Unwrap them and start wrapping them around my hand like so. Till I get to about right there. Now I like to take it and grip with my pinky right underneath it, and it kind of puts it right in line with where I want it to be on my wrist. And I'll take it and crank it out. I mean, I'm actually putting a good bit of torque on this one. I don't usually tighten them this much unless I'm going for a big bench. Now, I'm going right around where that red seam is, just a little bit below, and then working my way back up, pulling on them nice and tight the entire time, and kind of clasping them to my chest to hold it in place. Pulling it out, coming around the wrist again, holding, out, around the wrist, and in. And then you'll have that right there. So you can see that it's up around the wrist. It's not on the palm, but it's at the base of the wrist. Pull the strap off, and there it is. And that is as tight as that's ever going to get. As you can see, my hand is actually starting to turn white. This thing is stupid, and you don't really want to be doing it that tight unless you're just going for a heavy single and getting it off of there, because it hurts. But anyway, that's a quick, brief explanation of wrist wraps, how to use them, why we use them, and some of the ones that I have. There's a ton of different wrist wraps out there. Inzer makes some. Elite FTS has some of their own. They're the metal wraps, stuff like that. Just if you're going to go with a good wrap, I would say go with something that's actually a good brand. Spend some money on them because they'll last a lot longer and you'll get a lot more use out of them. At bare minimum, go with something with like the Rogue wraps or whatever. Or if you're really serious about your pressing and stuff like that, start looking into something like this. Anyway, I hope that's been informative. I hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, until next time.
I mean, my heart's beating, my hands are shaking, but I'm still shooting, I'm still getting